Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and today I'm joined by Rachel.
Hey, y'all.
And Alex.
Hey.
And we have Mark Ashton here.
What up?
It's good to have you on the show. Occasionally you have a little extra time to drop in and join us for a conversation.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Today we are going to be talking about our ever-changing world as we start to cope with and innovate through this COVID-19 crisis that's all around us. But through it, we're seeing a lot of exciting changes, and I think everybody's learning a lot of new things. And we just kind of wanted to talk about that and see what we're seeing in our own lives and in the church, and kind of walk through that. I think for me personally, just on the side of what is known as online church, it is so fun to just see all of these different churches tackling it their own way and trying to innovate and figure this out. And one of the things that I find kind of ironic about it is just the conversations that we had even a month ago about online church, and like, well, how is it? How can we consider it real church? How can we, can we consider the people watching it part of our congregation? Can we, you have these internal conversations about what online church is, where does it belong? And we kind of just had our hands forced at this point into, well, there is no debate anymore. This is church. This is what it is. And in some ways, I think you saw some people kind of push back against it, and now you're seeing people embrace it. And so that's, I think that's kind of a lead into what we want to talk about. I know, Alex, you mentioned the way you're trying to disciple people through technology with Google Hangouts and Zoom or Skype or anything like that.
Yeah. I think traditionally, online church probably is just thought about, or churches mainly have done it through we are broadcasting our Sunday morning service, and that's what online church looks like. And maybe some churches will have chat features, and a lot of churches have been like, if you're on Facebook on a Sunday morning, you see tons of churches popping up and going live. And so I think that's been the initial thought and conversation around it. But where it's come to the discipleship team is, okay, now when we don't meet together, how do we actually meet together? The church obviously isn't just about a Sunday morning gathering and just that 1 hour and presenting that as, here's what our church does, here's all we are. But when we're kind of been forced now into this small group gatherings, and how are we still getting people to lean in even more, because now we're kind of forced into distancing and forced into quarantine. So what's that look like? And so it's been one of those things I hadn't thought through a ton of, like, how do we utilize things like Zoom and all that kind of stuff and innovate, and our leaders have been doing incredible things like that and been sharing stories. And it's one of the most fun things is getting emails from like people that probably never are on the internet, and they're like, you can have face-to-face interactions, that maybe they've never used FaceTime or Zoom or anything like that. And just some of our older, member groups, and they value community so much that they're willing to risk things to try new things to be able to be together. And so that's been fun to hear some of those stories. But I know for me, my group, we've gone to Zoom, and our group leaders made that decision, and we literally had one of our best meetings that we've ever had on Monday or Sunday night. And so we had to switch things up. We usually meet in someone's basement, all that kind of stuff. And this time it was the guys only met on Sunday night, because we've got 8 couples in our group. And so 16 people gets a little bit wild on Zoom. And so we're like, let's try something different. Let's have the guys only meet on one night, and then the gals meet on Monday night. And so it was one of the best conversations we've had for guys to be real and authentic. And I could see that moving forward, going forward, even once we get back together. Every guy left that we could still do this. We meet every other week, but maybe on the off weeks, the guys, could get together on Zoom and have these conversations, because it met a need in our souls that if we weren't forced into this kind of environment, we would have never even seen as a need. And so that's kind of what my group's done through Zoom, and what the state of our church has, been, and Google Hangouts and all that kind of stuff. But what do you guys think? What's your groups or things that you've been a part of, what have those looked like? How have they interacted? Is Zoom even, or Google Hang, whatever? Does it feel not quite as good? What do you think?
I'll have to be honest, because I struggle with the whole online church thing. That's always been something that I kind of push against a little bit. It just kind of, I have to wrestle with, man, like that just doesn't feel like being with people and community and living life alongside each other. Like it's on a screen and you don't feel connected as much. And so I've always been kind of hesitant to kind of step into that area of ministry. And I think this really has forced a lot of people to kind of be like, well, we can't come to church. We can't meet in our small groups. How are we still going to stay connected? And even this week, I've felt a lack of community and encouragement, and I just felt it. And then last night we had the women's ministry had that online Facebook Live, and then we all watched the same live like sermon together, and then we all got to talk about it, and it just brought me so much life. And I never thought watching something on Facebook and then like commenting in a post would actually encourage me and bring me life and like all that stuff. But it really kind of opened up my mind to what that can look like, and that God can use these tools, even if it's kind of like, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. Like I still was able to see God work and move through those tools, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think there's some powerful things about the way that it's getting multiplied, the online church. So people who are sharing on Facebook watch parties are commenting that, hey, I've got, old neighbors and college buddies and people who would never come to church are people who are coming to my Facebook watch party, and they're hearing the good news for the very first time or in a way that they never have before. And so there's a lot of power in that. As we look at our numbers, the way they've multiplied, not only are online watches dramatically up, but our overall attendance is dramatically up through what's happening online, and it's a powerful thing. And we're measuring conservatively, and still it's up in a dramatic fashion. So we're reaching people we never would have reached during this time. I do think there's something that you miss on Sunday mornings if you're an attender. I mean, the group worship environment is not the same as singing in your living room, and hallway conversations don't happen, and other key things that happen on Sunday morning don't happen online. But for a time being, this is a powerful thing. It's an interesting thing as well when I think about the persecuted church worldwide. Sometimes they come under such pressure that they can't meet together and they don't have online options. And so we're getting a tiny piece, just a tiny slice of what is it like to have some adversity, to have some, it's not really persecution, but at least to have some hang-ups that are along the way. You can't meet together, what do you do? And I feel like our people are doing a great job of making the best of that.
Yeah, and I think even for like our kids ministry, we've noticed like a spike in like their interaction on our Facebook page, which is like we weren't really like focused so much on our Facebook page before, but now it's like, man, we gotta get to these parents and reach out to them, and we've noticed a huge spike in our Facebook page. But we're like, well, even after this, like how cool is it that like during the week we can send out resources and help parents, have different tools to disciple their kids through the Facebook page. And I think it's growing our ministry for the future, even after everything, goes back to normal.
Well, and I think that's the exciting part about it is it's creating these problems, and that's obviously, the mother of invention. And so we're innovating in a way that maybe it's even taken other things off our plates to where we're like, okay, well, let's just try this. We got to try something new. And, people are experiencing it in ways they never have before. And I think with the even the online communication thing that's been going on for a long time, it's not something that the church necessarily has been a big part of, but people, ever since the invention of the internet, have been meeting online, getting married because they met online, starting communities online. As a self-proclaimed kind of nerd myself, whether it's web forums or online video game streaming or other things like that, where your whole communities are built around a chat platform where you're just talking with other people, like it was a no-brainer to me, like this can work. But I think when you have people who have just only known one way, it's a little bit harder to get them to buy in. And so it's one of those things where I think the introverts are kind of just like, well, not much changed for me, maybe, I'm kind of, I don't go out at night anyways. Like I don't normally socialize face to face, but I think for the more extroverts, this is a real challenge, but it's exciting to see them kind of get a taste of it.
Yeah, I think the crisis forces people over the learning curve where they wouldn't have had to get over that before.
Yep.
So for us, being a 5-generation church, we've got people who are very nimble in terms of change and people who are really set in their ways. And this kind of forces everybody, hey, if you want to experience church, you've got to learn how to use, Facebook or cccomaha.tv or Zoom or Google Hangouts. And people are learning that. And it's happening very fast. I mean, it's happening in a matter of days because people are saying, I still want to have my connections.
Yeah, and people are learning things about you and your wife, even your ability to sing and dance a little bit.
Or inability.
So that was a fun treat that our church got to have. If you haven't seen that, just go ahead and check out our church's Facebook page because Eric gladly shared.
It was a great
no corona
parody video on.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a little story behind that, and that I've been doing these devotions on Facebook where the first one was more enthusiastic. Hey, we're going to be able to get through this. And Kelly came to me and she said, we really need some pastoral in there as well. So second one, the tone totally changed. I'm pastoral and thankful for what God's doing for us and comforting people and all those kinds of things. And then Kelly comes to me and says, we really need something fun. People are all bummed out about things. They really don't need another devotion from you. They need something that's going to make them laugh. And so Kelly's in a lot of ways driving our Facebook posting. And of course, the number of likes that you get, one of the things I'm learning here is devotions, for me, they're getting 113, 119 likes in there. Man, Dungeons and Dragons figures get 178.
Yeah.
And then, the dance video, it just explodes. So
speaking of your Dungeons and Dragons post there, that was, I think, you're kind of showing in a little bit to maybe your family life, personal life, like kind of, is that something, that's something that I'm assuming was going on a little bit before this, but is that something you've kind of maybe leaned into a little more because of the social distancing? Or?
Well, I think I had a little bit more time, to be able to finish a project that was almost done for a long time. And do a little bit of extra painting, and I put it out on a whim. And I really thought this is like geeky dweeby stuff that nobody really cares about, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway for the few who might care. And it's amazing how people love to have those windows into your, your dweeby normalness.
Yeah, I hear a lot of people in the church are ordering floral couches now after seeing the one in the basement. So Amazon is fresh out of floral couches as a result.
That's like the circa 1994 couch that's in the back room. Yeah,
that's pretty good. So anyways, the technology side of it, it's there. It's interesting even to watch, like even outside of our own church, like I'm just enjoying watching churches that were kind of like, well, we're never doing online. That's not our thing.
Yeah.
And then now they're just like putting a phone up and filming, broadcasting their services. And it's just interesting to watch how this is evolving. And I don't know, we'll see. I think everyone, like, it's kind of, we're up in the air, right, about when this whole thing is going to end and when we're kind of going to get back to some normalcy. But I think we're just going to continue to see this stuff advance as we go.
And it gives us a great excuse to establish a new normal. That's part of the exciting piece of this is when you're forced into innovation, then you make discoveries that you go, ooh, we don't want to give that up when we get back to our new normal. So it'll be an adventure to see what we land in as well.
No, that's true. Yeah. So, besides just the technology side of it, are there other like new habits that people are starting to kind of form that maybe they didn't before? I know, Rachel, you mentioned Twitter is something you kind of stayed away from, and now you're kind of maybe becoming a Twitter follower.
I feel like this crisis has really just made me realize that I'm like an old lady. Like, I don't like online stuff. Like, I was like, Twitter's horrible. Like, I'm never going to get that. All these kids are just on, and I'm just like, what the heck? I'm 26 years old. Like, I don't know why I'm so resistant to all this stuff. But yeah, Twitter is something that I kind of started getting more into, more because of how quickly you can get updated on what's going on in the world. So, like, our governors and the president are updating us daily on things, and it was just so much easier for me to get on Twitter and see, what they're saying, or like go to their videos. So I kind of started getting into that like news world of what's going on in the news, and I can get updated really quickly. But as I've gotten into it more, Twitter is very clearly a place where people like to post their opinions. And I was like, I was getting kind of sucked into it. Like, you can follow what they're saying and then read what other people are saying. And it just goes down this like really like deep rabbit hole. And you're just like, oh my gosh, it gets you angry. Like some tweets were like getting me angry. And I was like, oh, I just want to like tweet back at them and be like, whatever. And so I just think more people are online and on social media now than ever, just trying to keep up with other people or see what's going on in the world, because there's not a lot of other ways you can keep up, and I think Twitter is a big one. So I'm still trying to navigate what that looks like to discern what are the good news sources that I need to follow, and what are the good opinions that I need to follow, instead of just getting sucked into every different opinion and trying to figure out what I think about what's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the things we've seen from this is misinformation just kind of spreading almost equally as fast as the virus. And
yeah.
So true. One of the things you got to protect yourself from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, discernment it's hard in moments like this when things do come out so fast, and we have that itch to want to know and be the most informed and have the best information, and literally it's like constantly changing, and you think you're doing things right or by the standards of like what you saw yesterday by the government, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, we should have cleaned this, or we should have worn 2 gloves, or even I've gone into stores, and they've got like 6-foot gaps between everything, and Costco has taken all their chairs out. Like it looks like a totally different place. They're selling cars now instead of food in Costco, and so it's been kind of a wild adventure to see what some of that kind of stuff looks like in this world of social distancing and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, and how posts are driving people's actions. So the whole, toilet paper issue, like I never would have gone to the store and bought more toilet paper unless I saw that everybody else was buying more toilet paper and it was all going out of stock, and I was like, oh no, everybody's freaking out and we need toilet, it's like that drove people's actions when they saw it on display in front of them. And so I think also trying to realize like, okay, I can't let these things drive how I'm acting or what I'm doing, because it's really driven me back to being like, okay, I need to rely on God and what he's telling me to do and how he's telling me to act, instead of getting sucked into all of these things that other people are saying. I think it's easy to get kind of drowned. God's voice is getting more and more drowned out as other people's voices are kind of raising up.
Yeah, and the voices of fear are the ones that get the most clicks, they get the most replays, they get the most time. And as fear is diametrically opposed to faith, oftentimes we see our actions getting driven through the keyhole of fear instead of through a confidence in God. And we see that happening. I think the toilet paper is a great example of behavior that's driven by fear that's not based on a shortage. There's not a toilet paper shortage in America. They have distribution channels, but there's going to come a time where people are going to realize, I got way too much toilet paper sitting in my garage, and I do not need to buy this for a matter of months. So,
well, and it seemed like that all started just from a rumor about manufacturing or something like, oh, the people who are making the toilet paper are going to be sick and there's not going to be enough. And so that little rumor just exploded into this mass hysteria of toilet paper purchasing, which is crazy.
So maybe in a couple months we'll see a lot more houses being toilet papered.
All the yard sales in the summer are going to have toilet paper for sale.
Giving it away. Well, I've even seen some churches or companies like trying to be innovative with toilet paper too. They're like, if you buy our product and we'll send you a roll of toilet paper. So maybe companies are like storing up toilet paper so they can send it out. It's like become this weird hot, like the most random hot commodity in the world is toilet paper. And so a lot of countries don't even, or people have gotten really innovative for that kind of stuff, but that's a different kind of show.
You mentioned it last week.
Well, not just bidets, but people like that are like recycling like clothes and doing all those kind of things. And so it points to how like first world problems too, like inside of America. Like
that's what we're worried about running out of is toilet paper.
And I have to get to the store, and like literally there's like updates all the time on Twitter. This store has 57, rolls of toilet paper. You got to get there fast. And it's wild.
The most innovative thing I saw was someone, I think somewhere in Britain, they put one roll or one package or whatever was like $2.99. 2 was $99.99. So just pretty much to try to discourage people from overbuying. But
that's smart.
Yeah, it is. Are there other ways we're seeing changes that, like obviously the social distancing side of it, we're all cooped up in home at least in the evenings, and many are working from home. Kids are at home, so moms and dads are trying to figure out how this dynamic is going to work. What are some of the other things that we're seeing that, are worth maybe bringing to people's attention?
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed is the impact that it's had on families. Mm-hmm. So families that are not used to spending that much time together are now spending time together. And if you go back, throughout history and farm communities and so forth, families spent all of their time with each other all of the time. America's is actually a unique cultural setting in that we divide and conquer, that kids are sent to different grades in their schools, they have different relationships, they've got different programs they're a part of. So bringing the families back together and saying, you can't go to your normally scheduled programs, it's an interesting dynamic of families actually getting to know each other better because they're being forced to spend that time together. And I know some are responding in rebellion from that. Some are embracing it and really running after intimacy in their families. There's a grade school teacher across the street from us who we were talking with yesterday, and she said that a family from her grade school came in. They're kind of a performance, sports-oriented, high caliber type of family. And the mom said, we're actually getting eyeball-to-eyeball time, and it's been really good. And I just think how having a break from the fast-paced tyranny that the American lifestyle has on families' lives is a powerful positive for our families, and getting to spend that time together. I know last night, our family, for example, we had in 7 different locations. We were on our Zoom group. We played Yahtzee together for an hour and a half as a family. Wow. But part of the reason we could do that is because in all of our 7 different locations, we were all quarantined. Yeah. So none of us had activities on a Tuesday night, and we could just Zoom to each other and hang out and have some family time, even across state lines. So I think there's some powerful pieces that are really working for families.
Mm-hmm. And I think anywhere there's an opportunity, everyone wants to seize it too. And so we're seeing that like you mentioned, Eric, every church now is online, or everyone's putting out more and more content. And so there's really cool things about that, but then there's also overstimulation that, that could happen, or there's just way too much content that we can't even consume. And so there's an ability in some ways to, even though maybe we have more time under the same roof, actually drive people away. My son, he's a first grader, and so homeschool yesterday, it wasn't like he had to sit in front of his computer for 2 hours essentially and watch videos and do all this kind of stuff. And so there's actually that normal schedule of things like that happening, and real stresses. One of our pastor's wives yesterday posted that just their daughter was throwing up, and not because she was sick, but just because she's a straight A student, but just under the pressure of thinking, what's school going to look like now? How am I going to get my stuff done? And just the fear and panic that I think happens inside of that. And maybe my mom doesn't know. She's not an expert. And so I think there's ways that the enemy is going to try to create dividers and wedges as well. And so we all have to think in our family dynamic, how do we steward this wisely? How do we not just jump on the next bandwagon of just because there's more information? We could just go fill that time with that. I would have been at practice on a Tuesday night with just more stuff that's not productive. And so I think weighing those things, especially maybe as parents or even as individuals, because I can just get lost now with way more content in my phone or my device and following up with this stuff than ever before. And so I think that discernment piece is big for families and parents and all that kind of stuff as we move into this different landscape as well. Because obviously Satan knows that we're going to have more time together, but he doesn't like real face-to-face interaction and conversations. And so in some ways it could do the opposite if we're not careful. It could just isolate us in the same home even more than ever, which would be a dangerous thing. So,
well, and I think another cool thing that God is doing through this is revealing idols for people of what their idols were before, because it's all these things are getting removed. Sports are getting removed, school's getting removed, all these different things. Even planning, for me, I've noticed planning is an idol. So I like to plan ahead. I like to figure out what I'm going to do. And right now I'm literally having to live day by day because I have no idea what's going to happen the next day.
Yeah.
And so I just think how cool it is that God's revealing these idols to us so that we can see, you know, more clearly, like, man, that really had an impact on me. Why am I so upset or, you know, having a really hard time with the fact that I can't, you know, go play my sports this week or you know, whatever it is. And I just think this is a cool time for us to really like dig deep and look into our hearts and see what is God trying to do in my heart and my life during this time, because we have a lot of extra time that we can really just get with the Lord and seek him in that. So
it's driven in me some apathy, if I'm on, like, you know, I had a pretty regular workout schedule, like basketball a couple times a week, and we can't do that. And then, you know, go into a gym and you can't do that. And so I'm like, well, I've got a lot of excuses not to, and then I'm filling some of that time that I would have used with, you know, other information or the urgent, you know, the tyranny of the urgent of getting another thing done. And, you know, so like it's the first time in probably the last year, like I literally went a week without doing much, you know, physical exercise that I was normally used to, because I'm just like, we'll get back to normal one day. And so it's creating like I was realizing that last night, a bad pattern and habit in my life that was healthy, even when I was more busy, you know? And so I think that for me, it's driven apathy in that one of those places in my life towards that. And so I think that's one of the things with our idols is we can fill it up with a new thing if we're not careful. And so that's not just to remove something and refill it with something that's just as negative or, you know, that leads to apathy or not towards growth or production is dangerous as well for me in my heart. So
good. Yeah. You know, I might add into that I've noticed that people who are socially isolated, socially distanced from each other, have a strong yearning for community. And I think one of the things that's going to come out of this is people will have a higher value on their face-to-face contact. When you have it all the time, every opportunity you want, you know, you kind of start to take it for granted. One of the things we've noticed as we've been encouraging our pastoral staff to just make phone calls to people, just call them up, see how they're doing, you know, make a connection with them, see if there's something you can pray for them about. And the phone calls are usually very appreciated, but sometimes they go much longer than you anticipate because people are just yearning for community. They just want somebody to talk to. And it's been a really powerful ministry tool. I think that as things move back to the normal again, there will be a much higher appreciation for community in such a way. I think it could even mark an entire generation of their desire to be with each other, to be with their friends, to be connecting with people in a strong way.
And that normalcy, like there's parts of me that I want to get back to normal, but then I don't want it ever to get back to normal, like the status quo that was normal. And so there's exciting things about the innovations and things like that of like, man, I could have been doing this the whole time. I could have been making phone calls, or I could have been doing some of these things and having more deep connection with people, but I just got bit. So there's things that I don't want to ever get back to normal in. And so that's my prayer too, is like, man, Lord, would you continue to help me see those things that are fruitful and things I should hold on to, and then cling to the things that I want, because I do want to get back to sports. I want to get back to teaching my kids through some of those things as well. My wife would love them to get back to school, you know, because now she's like a guidance counselor and a health, you know, doing all these kind of things. So there's like parts of normal I want to get back to, but then parts I'm like, I hope I never go back to that normal. So that's an interesting thing too.
Yeah, I think like another one is busyness, just a forced kind of end of busyness. You can't be busy. You can't fill your schedule with all these things because they're not happening. And I think that's one thing that I'm like, I don't want it to go back to normal. Like I like that I can just rest and I don't have to say, oh no, I'm sorry, I don't want to do this, or feel like I have to say yes to all these different things because they're not actually even happening right now. And so I think busyness is just a huge one that I'm like, I really hope that people learn to love like rest and just, you know, slowing down, a slower pace of life, so that that's one of the things I'm like, please don't change.
Yeah. I think to your point earlier, Mark, about even some of the elderly community, like I think it's really important for us to have some empathy there and try to understand where they're coming from. Because I think I've heard stories of, you know, some of the elderly generation who are just like, well, I'm going to church no matter what, or I'm, you know, they're kind of going to be stuck in their way or whatever. And you hear different reactions to that. But I think one thing we have to keep in mind is that they're of a different generation. This stuff doesn't come as natural to them, and it's easy sometimes for people who are younger and used to just using technology as a solution to just kind of brush them off and go, well, this is just the way it is. It's fine. But I think seeking out those people who might be kind of in that generation, like could be so helpful. That
Very
phone
helpful.
call, just to like even walk them through, like how do you set this up? Hey, is your internet working? Like how can I help you? I think that stuff's really important right now.
Yeah,
Well-
I'd say a couple other things about that generation too is they've lived through a lot of ups and downs.
Right.
Some of them as far back as World War II. And so they're just like virus. They're
Yeah.
like, I'm not scared. I'm not skipping
Right.
church because of that. They have a kind of a less fearful existence because they've lived through a lot of trauma and tragedy. And the other thing is, and this, I don't want to get too morbid, but a lot of them just aren't afraid of dying.
Yeah.
They've already come to their resolution around that. They've lived 70, 80, 90 years, and they're saying, you know what? I know my time is coming soon,
Yeah.
and I'm not going to stop living life because I'm afraid of death. I'm embracing the idea that there is death and there is resurrection after death. And, my body's breaking down and things are more painful than they have been in the past. So I'm just not that scared.
The bravery is something so that we should find admirable. You know
Absolutely.
what I mean? Like it's yeah.
Yeah, their faith, their bravery, their resilience over time. I just think those are all things I go, man, that's commendable in our older generation.
Yeah.
Well, and I think about my own grandparents, and like Sunday church is their community. Like that is where they go and get community. They go to Sunday school, and then they go to the service, and then they go to lunch with all of their friends after this. Like it's like that's been kind of taken away from a lot of people, and so it would be hard to be like, okay, well now I'm just gonna watch online, but that's their whole community, their friends and everything that they interact with. And even a lot of the elderly in our church have a breakfast here every week, and that's how they have community. But we can't do that anymore because it's too many people, and so it really is stripping a lot away from them, especially if they can't get online or use those tools as well.
Yeah. Grace abounds. We're just gonna we all have to figure that out, and I think and I think there are a lot of people with a lot of fears around what's happening right now, rightfully so. That whether it's the economy or their health or their job security, and so I think just being a good neighbor is important right now. I think it's another opportunity to make that phone call, or even knock on the door and keep your distance and just make sure everybody's doing okay. But yeah, these things are important.
I think it's opened up the doors for really strong good neighborliness and strong evil to take place as well.
Yeah.
We experienced a little of that in our neighborhood just the last couple of days. Yesterday, we had some thieves that were in the neighborhood breaking into cars and stealing everybody's stuff. Kelly found some wallets that were under bushes when she was out walking the dog, and so we had the chance to return those. My neighbors called me because my car was one of the ones that got broken into, and nothing was taken out of it, but their Ring video doorbells caught it, and so they're texting me, letting me know that it's going on. So we see this big altruism that's happening in our neighbors. I feel like people step up to the good when there's a crisis, but I think the thieves also know that the police are preoccupied with coronavirus, and thieving is not going to get as high a priority anymore. So they're taking advantage of people being locked in their homes and police being busy to do their dirty deeds as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's all we're all going to kind of figure this out as it goes. Hopefully it doesn't get to a point where we start to see more of that kind of the bad side of humanity come out. I think right now everyone's trying really hard to even outside of the Christian world, even trying to put the best foot forward and best face forward and try to be friendly. And I don't know. Hopefully we all learn something from this and we keep to progress.
Yeah, and I think building empathy for, like you were saying, how people grieve, like an older generation, maybe it's because all their community was here, so they don't have a job to go to and just have community or work on projects together. They work on prayer together, and they put together prayer pamphlets, and they're so that is their community. There's people, that their weddings have been they've been literally planning on this moment since like she was a little girl, and it's kind of all been wrecked, and what do I do? Or a funeral. I've got a guy in my small group whose dad is literally like dying, and not doing well. And he's like, we can't go visit my dad, because they don't want us in, to get someone else sick and all that kind of stuff. And so there's seniors that are like, am I going to walk? And is my sports thing going to happen? seniors that just didn't get a play in March Madness, so all of those things that were like, oh, they're idols, they're just silly things, but they're also like, it's appropriate to grieve those things and not just stuff it, or not just like, oh, it's not a big deal. Yeah. And so how we listen to those people really well, I think those are some of the invitations we have, is to listen and to grieve with people in the midst of a lot of different things. Yeah. Because one of the things we can just do is be like, that's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of the world, or your retirement hit, $10,000, took a $10,000 hit, but you've got way more money than me anyway, so how do we grieve with people that are really going through a lot of these things, and be present and build empathy towards them, I think is one call, for especially Christians to react differently than the rest of the world in moments like this, and give compassion and show love and serve one another in this kind of moment. And so I think it's a beautiful call and a beautiful opportunity that we have as believers to just speak differently in those kind of things.
That's good. Well, before we wrap it up, is there any other, nuggets of wisdom that anyone wants to share, or any other ideas around this that have just been weighing on your heart, or did we say our piece? Anyone? No, we're all good. Okay. All right. I think it's one of those things we've mentioned it last week too, and I think it's important to keep mentioning that we record these a lot of times on Wednesdays. It comes out on Friday. So if you're listening on Friday and this is all changed and there's something bigger that you think we should be talking about, we didn't get there yet. So, but we appreciate Mark being here.
Thanks. Awesome to be here.
Yeah. Anytime you can take some time and join us, it's fun. Thanks to everybody else for being here, and for you for listening, taking time out of your day, whatever you might be doing in quarantine right now, but listening to this, it means a lot to us. If you want to reach out to us, if you have any questions, you can do that by getting at us on social media. That's at CCC Omaha, or you can email the podcast directly at podcast@cccomaha.org. We'd love to hear from you and take your questions. Until next time, we'll talk to you then.